The snow was falling heavily that December night, blanketing our small town in a hushed serenity. I've always loved walking through the winter wonderland, feeling the crunch of fresh snow beneath my boots. But that night, something felt different. An eerie stillness hung in the air, and with each step I felt a growing sense of unease. I was halfway through the park when I noticed them, a set of footprints in the snow, leading off the path into the woods. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The tracks were odd, evenly spaced, as if whoever made them was walking calmly, without a care in the world. But then, they just stopped. No more footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. Just an empty clearing and the quiet whisper of falling snow. I looked around, baffled. There were no other tracks leading away. It was as if the person had simply vanished into thin air. I hurried back home, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows of the trees. Even now, as I recount this tale, I wonder who, or what, left those footprints and where they disappeared to on that cold winter's night.
It was during one of the coldest winters our town had ever seen when I experienced something truly inexplicable. The lake had frozen over early that year, its surface a flawless sheet of ice. They say when a lake freezes quickly, you can hear it sing, a symphony of groans and cracks echoing through the air. But what I heard was different. One evening, as I stood by the frozen lake's edge, a faint whisper seemed to rise from beneath the ice. It was soft at first, barely audible over the howling wind. But as I listened more intently, it grew louder and more distinct, a voice calling out to me. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was pleading, desperate even. I searched around for someone else who might have heard it too, but I was alone in the moonlit silence. The next day I returned with a friend, determined to prove I wasn't imagining things. But no matter how long we stood there listening, the whispering ice remained silent. To this day, I can't explain what or who was calling out to me from beneath that frozen expanse. But every winter since, I find myself drawn back to that lake, listening for a voice that never speaks again. I'll never forget that blizzard, the one that shut down our city for days. It was relentless and brutal, but in its fury, I saw something that defies explanation. I was trudging home from work, my vision obscured by the swirling snow, when I noticed a figure standing still in the middle of the street. It was a shadowy silhouette, unmoving despite the storm raging around it. As I approached cautiously, it seemed to be looking right at me, or through me, with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I called out to offer help, thinking maybe someone was in trouble. But there was no response. The figure just stood there silently. A gust of wind whipped up a blinding cloud of snow between us, and when it cleared, the figure was gone. No footprints led away from where it had stood. It was as if it had been swallowed by the storm itself. I ran home, my mind racing with questions. Who or what had I seen out there? And why did it feel like it had been waiting for me? Even now, every time a snowstorm descends upon us, I can't help but wonder if that shadowy figure is out there, standing silently amidst the chaos.
It was a night like any other in our sleepy mountain town. The snow had been falling for days, relentless and suffocating. I remember the way it muffled the world, as if we were all living in a snow globe that some giant child had forgotten to shake. That evening, I decided to brave the cold for a walk with my old collie, Max. The streets were deserted. Even the moon seemed to hide behind a curtain of clouds. As we wandered past the edge of town where the old mill sits abandoned, I felt a chill that went deeper than the winter air. Max growled, his hackles raised, staring at something in the darkness beyond. I squinted, trying to make sense of what appeared to be a figure, cloaked in white, standing perfectly still amidst the swirling snowflakes. I called out, thinking perhaps someone was in trouble, but there was no response. As we approached, the figure became clearer. A woman, or what seemed like one, but her features were blurred as if she were part of the snow itself. She was looking at something in her hands that glowed with an eerie light. I reached out to touch her shoulder, and my hand passed through her as if she were made of mist. Panic surged through me as Max barked furiously. The apparition looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and in them, I saw a sadness that was ancient and profound. Then she vanished, leaving only a gust of cold wind that seemed to echo with whispers of a time long past. I ran home, but the image of her haunted eyes stayed with me. Days later, I learned of an old legend about a woman who'd gotten lost in a blizzard a century ago, searching for her lost child. They say her spirit still roams the mill on snowy nights. I can't explain what I saw, but sometimes when the snow falls heavy, I feel her presence, and I wonder, what was she holding that glowed so brightly against the winter's night?
Growing up in a small town where everyone knows your name can be comforting or suffocating. It was during one of those long winters that my friends and I decided to break the monotony with a little midnight adventure. There's something about being a teenager that makes you feel invincible, even when you're not. We gathered at our usual spot near the outskirts where the forest meets civilization. The snow had cast an otherworldly glow over everything, and our laughter seemed to be the only sound for miles. Our breaths formed clouds in the frigid air as we dared each other to venture into the woods. The trees stood like silent sentinels guarding secrets as old as time itself. We trudged through the snow, our flashlights casting eerie shadows that danced between the branches. That's when we stumbled upon it. An old shack, hidden away as if it wanted to be forgotten by the world. Curiosity got the better of us as we pried open the creaky door. Inside was a single room covered in dust and cobwebs. But what caught our attention was the circle of chairs in the center, each one occupied by a doll. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their glassy eyes staring blankly ahead. We joked about it being some witch's lair or a ghost playroom, until one of my friends found a diary tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It belonged to a girl who once lived in our town, a girl none of us had ever heard of. Her words were filled with loneliness and longing for friends she never had. Suddenly, we heard a soft giggle from behind us. We spun around, flashlights flailing wildly, but there was nothing there except those lifeless dolls staring back at us. We left in a hurry, leaving the shack and its mysterious occupants behind. The next day, we tried to find it again, maybe to prove to ourselves it wasn't as creepy as we remembered. But no matter how hard we searched, the shack was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had vanished without a trace. Or perhaps it had never been there at all. Now when the winter nights draw close and the wind howls through the trees, I can't help but wonder about that shack and the girl who wrote in that diary. What happened to her? And who or what giggled in that darkened room full of silent witnesses?